Behind a quiet street in Kensington, London, hidden behind tall brick walls and a famous green door, sat a house that the world was never truly meant to see inside. For nearly 3 decades after Freddie Mercury's death, it remained exactly as he left it. His piano untouched, his Japanese art precisely arranged, his mirrored dressing room still holding the ghost of his reflection. Even his closest friends, people who had known him for years, admitted that when they finally walked through those rooms after he was gone, they were completely stunned. Not because the house was extraordinary, though it was, but because of what it quietly revealed about the man the world thought it already knew. This is the story of Garden Lodge, and what it said about Freddie Mercury that he never said himself. Before there was a Garden Lodge, before there was even a Freddie Mercury, there was a shy, buck-toothed boy named Farrokh Bulsara, born on September 5, 1946, in Stone Town, Zanzibar. His parents, Bomi and Ja, were Parsi Indians who had relocated to Zanzibar for work. Bomi served as a cashier for the British colonial government, and the family lived a modest, structured life rooted in their Zoroastrian faith. Nobody looking at young Farrokh would have predicted what was coming. He was quiet, studious. He collected stamps with his father. He wore glasses. He was not the boy anyone would have cast as the future king of rock. But nature had already made its investment. Farrokh was born with 4 extra incisors, giving him an unusual dental arch that would later expand his vocal range into something almost inhuman. He never had them removed, believing rightly that they were the secret engine behind his voice. At age 7, he began piano lessons while staying with relatives in India. A year later, he was enrolled at St. Peter's School near Bombay, a British-style boarding school where structure was strict but music was alive. It was there that Farrokh began calling himself Freddie, formed his first band, the Hectics, and displayed a gift that left his classmates speechless. He could hear a song once on the radio and reproduce it on the piano almost note for note, not because he had been trained to do so, but because the music simply lived inside him already. In 1963, he returned to Zanzibar, but the island was on the edge of eruption. The 1964 Zanzibar Revolution, a violent uprising against the Arab-led government, forced the Bulsara family to flee. Thousands were killed. The family escaped with little more than what they could carry and landed in Feltham, Middlesex, in the grey, rain-soaked outskirts of England. It was a world away from the warmth and color of Freddie's childhood. But England would become the furnace that forged him. He studied art at Isleworth Polytechnic and then at Ealing Art College, graduating in 1969 with a diploma in graphic design. Those skills were not wasted. Years later, it was Freddie who designed the iconic Queen crest, lions for John Deacon and Roger Taylor, a crab for Brian May, 2 fairies for himself, all rising beneath a blazing phoenix. It was the emblem of a band that hadn't yet conquered the world, but already believed it would. In those pre-fame years, survival meant hustle. Freddie worked as a baggage handler at Heathrow Airport. He sold vintage clothes at Kensington Market alongside Roger Taylor, who would later recall him as simply my crazy mate. Behind the growing flamboyance was someone unexpectedly shy, someone who absorbed music and art more than conversation, who preferred listening to performing until the moment a stage appeared beneath his feet. By 1970, everything aligned. Freddie joined forces with Brian May and Roger Taylor, eventually completing the lineup with bassist John Deacon. He pushed hard for the name Queen, bold, commanding, deliberately provocative, and regal in a way that no rock band had dared to claim. He dropped Bulsara officially and became Mercury. The transformation was complete. The man and the myth had merged. Queen's rise through the early 1970s was unlike anything the music industry had witnessed. Freddie's vocal range spanned nearly 4 octaves, moving freely from a warm baritone in conversation to a soaring operatic tenor on stage. He composed by instinct, rarely writing music down, instead sitting at the piano and allowing ideas to flow through him. The results were astonishing in their variety. Bohemian Rhapsody, nearly 6 minutes long, shifting from ballad to opera to hard rock, was unlike anything on radio in 1975 that record labels told him it was too long. Freddie didn't care. It became one of the best-selling singles in UK chart history. Then came We Are the Champions, Somebody to Love, Don't Stop Me Now, crazy little thing called Love, and Under Pressure. Each one arrived from a different emotional universe. because Freddie despised repetition. He said so openly. He wanted every song to feel like it came from a place no one had visited before. But it was the stage where the full force of Freddie Mercury was truly felt. He moved across arenas the way other people move through rooms, naturally, fearlessly, as if a space had been built specifically for him. David Bowie, himself no stranger to theatrical performance, once said that Freddie took things further than anyone else had dared. Brian May recalled how Freddie could reach the very last person in the back of the highest stand and pull them fully into whatever world he was creating. The pinnacle came on July 13, 1985, at Live Aid in Wembley Stadium. In just 20 minutes, with 72,000 people in the venue and a global television audience of nearly 2 billion, Freddie Mercury delivered what is widely considered the greatest live rock performance in history. Dressed simply in jeans and a white tank top, with nothing but a partial microphone stand as a prop, he owned every second. The sustained a cappella note he held that night became known simply as the note heard round the world. He hadn't just performed. He had proved something. His final concert with Queen was at Knebworth Park in August 1986. Nearly 200,000 fans watched as he closed with God Save the Queen, draped in a royal robe, holding a crown aloft. A week earlier, he had quietly told Brian May he probably wouldn't be doing this much longer. The curtain was falling, but it fell on his terms and on the grandest stage imaginable. For a man who performed in front of millions, Freddie Mercury was intensely private. He once said that he was exactly as private as he needed to be, meaning he gave the world the performance and kept everything else for himself. The great love of his early life was Mary Austin. He met her in 1969 when she was working at the fashion boutique Biba. She was 19, grounded and warm. He was 24, broke, and selling clothes at a market stall. They moved in together, and for years Mary quietly kept the lights on while Freddie chased fame. When it came, he proposed. She accepted, stunned. But the engagement eventually unraveled when Freddie told her the truth about his attraction to men. Mary, without anger, told him plainly that he was gay. That conversation ended the romance but deepened the bond in a way neither of them fully expected. Freddie called Mary his common-law wife for the rest of his life. He left her garden lodge and half his fortune. She became the keeper of his ashes, their final resting place still unknown to the public, a secret she has protected for over 30 years. In a life full of spectacle, Mary Austin was the quiet constant, the one person Freddie never performed for. Later came Jim Hutton, an Irish hairdresser Freddie met at a London nightclub in 1985. What began as a brief encounter grew into the most enduring relationship of Freddie's life. The two wore matching gold wedding bands. Freddie called Jim his husband. Jim was by his side for every remaining year, through the diagnosis, through the decline, through the silence of those final months inside Garden Lodge. He never spoke publicly about their relationship in grandiose terms. He simply said it was theirs, and it wasn't for the world to pick apart. Outside of love, Freddie's obsessions were vivid and total. His cats were essentially his children. He named them individually, spoke about them in interviews with the kind of tenderness rarely seen from rock stars, and would call home from tour specifically to have someone hold a telephone receiver to their ears. His favorite, Delilah, inspired one of his final recorded songs. His passion for Japanese art was equally intense. He spent years assembling a collection of woodblock prints, ceramics, lacquerware, and antique furniture that filled Garden Lodge like a private museum. He was not a casual collector. He was obsessive, knowledgeable, and deeply serious about every piece. In 1980, at the absolute height of Queen's global fame, Freddie spent £500,000 on a Georgian-style townhouse at 1 Logan Place in Kensington. He named it Garden Lodge, and from the moment he moved in, he began reshaping it into something that matched the landscape of his interior world. The exterior was deliberately understated. Tall brick walls, a green door, nothing to signal what lay beyond. But inside, the house was an extraordinary contradiction, at once intimate and theatrical, quiet and richly ornamented. The entrance hallway gave way to saffron yellow walls that radiated warmth, a color Freddie chose personally and never changed. The drawing room rose through 2 floors, dominated by his Bosendorfer grand piano, the very instrument on which Bohemian Rhapsody had first taken shape. The sound of that piano had filled arenas and defined a generation. Here, in this room, it sat quietly beneath the high ceiling, waiting. Upstairs, Freddie's bedroom was modest in a way that surprised people who expected something grander. Adjacent to it was his mirrored dressing room, a space that served as the portal between private man and public performer. It was here that he would lace up his white trainers, check his mustache in a glass, and become Freddie Mercury. The garden was perhaps the most breathtaking part of all. Freddie designed it himself in a Japanese style. Sculpted topiary, magnolia trees that bloomed in pale pink every spring, stonewater features, and carefully raked pathways. In Kensington, where outdoor space is almost mythically rare, Freddie had created his own private Eden. His music room opened directly onto it. So did the bar where he entertained his innermost circle. For 30 years after Freddie's death, the house remained largely as he had left it. Mary preserved it with extraordinary care, as though at any moment he might walk back through the green door, sit down at the Bosendorfer, and begin composing again. His personal belongings remained in place. His art collection stayed on the walls. The energy of the man lingered in every room. When Mary eventually decided to part with the property, she first sold over 1,500 of Freddie's personal possessions through Sotheby's in 2023 and 2024, with all proceeds directed to AIDS charities. What was cataloged and displayed stunned even those who thought they knew him well. There were handwritten lyric sheets in his own hand, early drafts of songs that had become anthems, covered in crossings out arrows, and revisions that showed the restless intelligence behind the melodies. There were the extravagant stage costumes, the white Xander Rhodes bodysuit, the black and white Harlequin outfit, the skin-tight yellow leather. Each one told a story of a man who understood that performance was visual theater as much as music. Most strikingly, there was the replica of St. Edward's crown and the purple velvet robe from Queen's 1986 Magic Tour, the very outfit he wore at Nebworth when he raised that crown to 200,000 people. In the context of a private sale, held in rooms far from any arena, those objects carried a weight that surprised everyone present. But the single most jaw-dropping item was the Green Garden door itself, the famous entrance to Garden Lodge, covered over decades and thousands of handwritten tributes from fans who had never been allowed inside. Love letters, thank you notes, drawings, names of people who had lost friends to AIDS and found solace in Freddie's music. The door was not just wood and paint. It was a living monument. When it went under the hammer, it sold for £412,750, nearly the same price Freddie had paid for the entire house in 1980 at BY 2024. Garden Lodge itself was listed for sale at over £30 million. The house had outlasted the parties, the diagnoses, the grief, and the silence. And it was still drawing people in. Freddie Mercury spent his last months inside Garden Lodge with a deliberately small circle. Jim Hutton, his personal assistant Peter Freestone, Mary Austin. The other members of Queen knew he was sick, but respected the unspoken agreement he had set. They didn't ask. He didn't tell. He simply kept making music. In 1991, with AIDS having ravaged his body, Freddie recorded vocals for what would become Made in Heaven, Queen's posthumous final album. Those who were present in the studio described watching a man who could barely stand insisting on working, on finishing, on creating until there was nothing left to give. On November 23, 1991, his publicist released a statement that Freddie had written himself from his deathbed. He confirmed his HIV diagnosis. He spoke of privacy, of protection for those he loved, and of hope for a world still learning how to face the disease. 24 hours later, on November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury died of bronchial pneumonia brought on by AIDS complications. He was 45 years old. The world stopped, not just because he was gone, but because of how carefully he had kept them from knowing how close the end truly was. Garden Lodge stood quiet behind its famous green door. Inside, the piano sat untouched. The Japanese art hung still on saffron yellow walls. And in the garden he had designed with such deliberate care, the magnolias would bloom again the following spring, just as they always had, just as they still do. Freddie Mercury could not control the disease that took him, but he controlled his story, his home, his privacy, and his exit with the same precision he brought to every performance. Even in death, he had the final word. Were you a fan of Queen? Drop a comment below. Which of Freddie's songs meant the most to you? If you enjoyed this video, hit like, share it with a fellow Queen fan, and subscribe for more stories like this. The next video is already on your screen, and trust us, you'll want to watch it.